What's up, everyone? It's the OOTP GM. I want to welcome you all to the 8th episode here of my Detroit Tigers GM Let's Play here on Out of the Park Baseball 18. So, we are here at the first year player draft, and just as a quick note for everyone out there, the live audio that I normally record with my episodes for this episode, unfortunately, I don't know what happened, but the audio got corrupted. So I am doing a voiceover narration for this episode, and I will try to resume my normal live audio for the other episodes. So here I was explaining that our record has fallen, that we're 7 games under 500, that we're 25-32, and that despite the fact that we've had a lot of injuries, it's actually kind of a small miracle in some ways that we are that good, and that the Twins had a 17-game losing streak, so we could have always have been the Minnesota Twins, who had struggled quite a bit. And we had a lot of different people that went on the disabled list for us. Josh Tomlin we lost at the beginning of the year. 2 starts into the season, he had a season-ending injury. And then we'd had guys like Norris and Liriano and Ryu all spend time on the disabled list. Fulmer had struggled at this point to the year. Cabrera and Castellanos and Christian Stewart and Ian Kinsler had all spent time on the disabled list, so that's what I was explaining here, that all those guys had spent time on the disabled list. So we just had struggled in general throughout the course of the beginning of the season. Just you can see from the stats, just we were not playing very well at all. So it's disappointing beginning of the season for us, but it is what it is, and we were going to try to make the best of it for the rest of the year. So we went ahead and I went into the first year player draft at this point, and I was explaining we had the 23rd pick. And there were some guys that I had looked at ahead of time in this draft, guys that I was interested in drafting and that I thought were going to be solid players for us. Of course, the problem is a lot of those guys more than likely would have been gone by the time we got there. So I was explaining that, and I was talking about some of the different players that I was looking at. Garrett Wolworth is a guy that I was targeting. He is an impossible demand guy, but he was someone that I was targeting, and then I started scrolling through and looking at some of the players like Jordan Adell and Cash Case, who both, as you know, we drafted Cash Case last year and he did not sign, so he was available once again this year to be drafted. And then I was looking at this Mason Martin guy, and I was showing that I want to give a shout out to Aaron Shellan, or Shellin. I apologize if I mispronounced your last name. He left me a note in one of my earlier videos and told me that you can enable the personality profiles for players, and I had missed that under the settings menu, so I wanted to thank Aaron for telling me that so I could re-enable it to show you guys here during the draft, because I think it is important to draft guys that have, high character, high work ethic, high intelligence during the draft. I think those guys are more likely to work out. And I was showing that with that player that he had, some positives there under his personality profile. Michael Curry was the same way. I was showing that these guys had positive traits in their personalities that were things that I was looking for. So I was scrolling through here. I was trying to find anybody that I was interested in. I was trying to make a hard decision, and in the end, I was looking at this Connor Scott individual, and in the end, I ended up deciding to draft Garrett Wolworth, even though he is an impossible signee. I liked a lot of his personality profile characteristics, high intelligence, high work ethic, that he's a leader, and I figured it doesn't hurt to take a chance on trying to draft a player like that. So we went into the second round and, looking at a few different players that were still available. Scott was a guy I was interested in, and I was scrolling through just trying to see if there's anybody from the list of players that I had made pre-draft, if they were still available, and it looked like most of them were gone. So I ended up looking at this Connor Scott, and I liked his ratings, so I ended up going ahead and drafting him, even though he had a higher demand. I wanted to take a chance on him. And then we advanced into the next round, and again, I was trying to see if any of the players that I had put on my list of players that I was interested in, if any of them were still available. And it didn't look like a lot of them were still there. It looked like most of them had been drafted, so I was going through and explaining, that a lot of these different guys look like they're gone. So I asked for my head scout recommendation, and I didn't necessarily agree. So I was looking at some of the pitchers there, some of the other players that were available. Chandler Day was a guy that I looked at. This Alston Jr., he was a guy that projected out to be he projected out to be a starter, so I liked that. So that's why I went ahead and took a chance on him, because he could potentially be a starter down the road, even though he's listed as a reliever in the draft. And then we moved forward to our next pick. And again, I was looking at some of these impossible players, seeing if I wanted to take a chance on any of them. Just kind of scrolling down, seeing if there's any players that I saw. John Malcolm, I had mentioned, was a guy that I had drafted him in a previous playthrough, and he had worked out for me really well, so that's why I decided to take a chance on him, because he has high work ethic, high intelligence. So guys like that usually have a tendency to work out well. And asked for, recommendation again, and, started going through some of the different players, seeing if I liked any of their ratings, if I liked what some of them had. Noah Croft was one of those guys. He was a top player available, so I was checking out what his ratings were, what his personality profile was. He didn't have a personality profile. So, again, Chandler Day was a guy that I was looking at. Even though he was an impossible signee, I wanted to look at what his ratings were. And I don't believe that I ended up drafting him. I think I ended up moving a little bit further down the list here. Yeah, and this is just, again, I was trying to find players that I had kind of marked ahead of time, and pretty much all of them had been drafted at this point. The Zach Cohn, he has high intelligence, so I think I want to say I ended up drafting him. I liked his ratings and I liked his makeup, even though his potential isn't super high. I did end up drafting him. And then we moved forward to the next pick, and I believe at this point, I started looking through and to see if there are any other guys that I was interested in. This Jacob McCarthy caught my eye because he was, I think one of the highest rated players left. And I was noting that it says in the game that he could potentially be a first baseman, but he doesn't have any first base ratings. But I decided to draft him because he was still the best player left, and then I went ahead and I completed the draft at that point, and decided to move forward because there wasn't a whole lot of really good players left, so I wasn't going to sit there and go through the rest of the draft looking through, 1-star or 1.5-star players. So I stopped at that point and decided that I was going to move forward to the next portion of the season, and that's what I was explaining here, is that I'm going to look, I'm going to look to move forward and get to the next part of the season, and kind of see where we can go, and I'll sign my draft picks off screen and go from there. And so here we've moved forward to the international free agency signing period, and our team had actually started to turn things around at this point. I noted that we had a nice long winning streak during the middle of June. We won, I want to say, 9 games in a row, which kind of launched us back into contention a little bit, which is a little bit surprising. We still were ravaged by injuries at that point. We still had quite a few guys that were on the disabled list that had been injured. So it was a little bit disappointing because we hadn't been able to stay off. Guys hadn't been able to stay healthy. But I was noting that some of the guys were having decent years and some of the guys started to play better. And that was a reason why we had kind of played our way back into contention a little bit. And how we had managed to turn things around. And so at this point, I went into international amateurs, and I noted the top 2 guys that were there. Starting pitcher and a first baseman. I believe the starting pitcher was looking for like 1.2 million, so I decided to offer him 2.5 million to try and make sure that we signed him. So I submitted that offer. I went back in, and then the first baseman, same thing. He was asking for like 600,000, I believe it was. at this point. So we went in and we offered him, I believe, 1.5 million. 1.5 is what I ended up offering him to try and make sure that we get those guys signed. They were the best international amateurs available, and you can spend up to $5 million. So, why not try to sign those guys if you can? And so we were moving forward at this point, and both of those guys did end up signing with us. So we got both of our international free agents, and I moved forward at this point. I was moving forward to the All-Stars, but then we had a couple of quick roster moves that we had to make. Guys were coming off the disabled list, so we made a few quick moves here in regards to our team. And, at this point, my mindset was, hey, we still have a chance to, and here I was explaining how we were going to get we were going to get pick compensation in next year's draft because we weren't able to sign a couple of the players that we had drafted. And then here I am making another roster move with Tyler Collins coming off the disabled list. But at this point, my mindset was we still have a chance to compete this year, and I was hoping maybe to try and make some moves if we continue to play well. But that was what I was really looking at this point was, we had surprisingly got ourselves back into contention, and, we were going to have some hard decisions to make, because if we kept playing like that, then there was a chance that we could, we could still compete for a wild card spot. I mean, we were still in it at that point, and we still had a chance to potentially, make some moves. So here I am making some roster moves to clear the way for guys that are coming off the disabled list. I think that was JP Graham. That was one of our relievers. So making some roster moves there real quick, and then I just kept moving forward until the All-Star team was formally announced, and we were watching how the team was doing. And we went ahead and I looked at the All-Star roster, and I believe Ian Kinsler was our only All-Star at this point. We went through, we didn't have any pitchers or any other guys, because like I said, with certain guys being injured, they did not make the All-Star rosters. So Kinsler was our only representative this year on the All-Star team, which was a little disappointing, but obviously when you have the kind of year that we were having, that's not going to be a big shock in terms of, only having one All-Star representative. So at this point, I was explaining, about what we were going to be doing next. And at this point, we move forward and we're at the trade deadline, and things have fallen apart for us at this point. We've fallen way behind in both the wild card race and in the division race. I was explaining about certain players and how some guys have started to play better, but how we're still being hit by injuries, and how just basically here I was showing, like I said, I was showing how far we'd fallen behind in the division and how far we were behind, in the wild card standings. And it was really disappointing for me to see that. I was really hoping for us to continue to play well, and that just didn't happen. So I decided to make some moves. This is the first one that I was showing. I decided to make a trade for Ian Kinsler, to trade him while his value was high. I was explaining that there were 4 guys that we were getting in the trade. One of them was a reliever, Robbie Ross Jr., and then 3 prospects. The 3 prospects are guys that range anywhere from, I believe it was 1 star to 3 stars. So no superstar prospects in the deal, but at least we're getting some value in return for Kinsler. We had to try to trade him while his value was high. And I noted that Avila didn't really care for either of our trades, but that we needed to make a move. So I went ahead and I completed that trade, and noted obviously the fans weren't happy to see Kinsler go, but we needed to get value for him while we could. And then the other move that I had decided to make at this point was to trade James McCann, and we were going to trade him to the St. Louis Cardinals. McCann had gotten unhappy because he wasn't the starting catcher anymore. Christian Vasquez had taken that role away. So we were showing, I was showing the players that we were going to get in this deal. Again, no big superstar type players, but they were all somewhat relatively decent prospects, a couple of pitching prospects, and a few other guys. So we went ahead and we made the move to trade James McCann, and to try to get something in return for these guys, because obviously we're not going to compete this year with as poorly as the team had been playing. So I would made the move there to call up Max Pentecost. He's going to be he was the guy we got in the trade, the Justin Verlander trade. He was one of the prospects we got in that trade. So Pentecost becomes our new backup catcher. And then I was talking about another spot that we were going to look to fill. With having traded Ian Kinsler, we had to fill another spot, and I decided to call up Zach Shepard. He hadn't played in AAA very long, but I decided, you know what, we've got 2 months left in the season. Let's call him up, give him a chance. He's going to play sparingly as it is, so let him have an opportunity to try and play to show us something, basically show us what he can do. And here I was just making some quick moves. I was putting one of the pitchers that I got in the St. Louis deal on the 40-man roster, then sending him down to AAA. And then Robbie Ross, I needed to make a move there, and I was placing Graham on the disabled list to make room for him because Graham was injured at that point. So we moved Ross over to the Major League roster. And at this point, pretty much, done at the trade deadline. I couldn't find deals for any other guys, and the guys that I might have traded were injured at this point. So we basically just had to, this is what we're going to have moving into the rest of the season. And that was pretty much it. So I want to thank you guys for watching this episode. As always, feel free to like and subscribe and leave any feedback. It's always welcome. The next episode will be the 2018 off season. I may do a short wrap-up video for 2018. I'm not sure yet. Thank you for watching.